Thank you very much for tuning in to Gokhshtein Unfiltered, episode 11. It's the relaunch. I'm here with Scott Melker. Scott, what's going on?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually happy to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to reaching out to you and just shooting the shit about the entire market and getting your perspective on it.
Yeah, man, shooting the shit is all there is basically worth doing at this point, right? Taking some wild ass guesses and then being proven wrong very quickly is seemingly the way of the world at the moment.
We met, well, I mean, I've already known about you in the space, but we had that whole get together with Business Insider where everybody was just, dropping their thoughts on the current market. Where do you see this market going right now?
Crypto specifically, Bitcoin specifically, or everything in general?
Specifically, okay, we can touch on Bitcoin and then we can move on to everything else. But specifically, let's start off with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually the question is inadvertently sort of a trap, right? Because for the first time in history, I think we have to think about everything when we think about Bitcoin. We had these glorious years of it being an uncorrelated sort of idiosyncratic asset where you could just check the chart and trade Bitcoin and not worry about what was going on in the world. And now everybody has to become expert in inflation and war and everything else basically that's going on in the world. So I think, unfortunately, and listen, I was one of the last sort of converts to the, oh shit, Bitcoin is actually a correlated asset at the moment mentality. I was still arguing it sort of to the death and was ready to die on that hill. But at this moment, I think we just need to watch what's going on with global markets, and then we can figure out what's going on with Bitcoin, right? And so the good news is I think that as doom and gloom as everybody seems to think things are, it's my opinion that inflation has likely topped, although it's just an opinion. And I mean, we have a lot of historical precedent for what has happened in context of similar situations in the past. It's not nearly as bad as people seem to make out, right? You get into it, you assume that everything's going to zero. It's the natural mentality of the bear market. But there have been 12 tightening cycles since the 1950s, because obviously the only thing worth talking about is inflation and the Fed, right? And so 11 of those 12 have turned out bullish for markets. Of course, we didn't have Bitcoin in those moments, but if we're going to go ahead and take that leap and say Bitcoin's trading like everything else, then we can assume that that will also be the case, that we can use that historical context. So 11 out of 12 times, except for the 1970s, it's actually been extremely bullish. There's those first few quarters where the markets sort of absorb all the information, the tightening, and then it goes back to business as usual. And then when you have an election year, especially a midterm election, things are even more bullish, because last time I checked, politicians tend to lose their jobs when markets are bad, and politicians hate losing their jobs, right? So it's my opinion that we're going to come into actually a pretty bullish, potentially, or at least not so bearish Q4, maybe a nice big October as election season ramps up, and then we'll see some good follow through coming into next year. So I'm not that concerned. And when we talk about it being a correlated asset, that's for now, right? But we also have historical context for what happens when shit gets good again, right? So March 2020, everything was going to zero. Everything was dead. COVID was going to be with us until, 2793 or whatever year we're all going to get our 749th booster. And, what happened? Bitcoin bottomed, stock market bottomed 11 days later. Stock market that the whole world has touted as the greatest bull run of all time, basically for that year and a half or whatever, it doubled. Cute. Bitcoin went from 3,800 at the bottom to 69,000, up 17x, and is still up, 6-7 times from those lows while the stock market corrects. So I think anyone with a rational brain in their head knows that crypto, Bitcoin is the asset class you want to be in when everything bottoms and starts to rage again. And by the way, it will. This is just a market cycle.
Speaking of cryptocurrency, what do you think about the upcoming, well, it's this week, the Ethereum merge? Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that assuming everything goes well, which I assume it will, I mean, they've been testing and teasing this thing, obviously, for years at this point. I think that it's going to be a huge fundamental shift for Ethereum. I think that's huge. That said, it's really reminiscent of Y2K to me. Like everybody's sitting there staring at their computer screen, waiting for a bomb to explode just because the fucking date changed, right? I mean, anyone, oh my God, like my clock on my computer's not going to know how to change. It's over. We're dead.
For sure.
Right. And so I think the merge will come and go. If it goes as planned, you won't even know it happened. Right. So all of your DApps, everything, DApps, everything will continue running. You won't have to do anything. You'll just continue on with your life as you did before. But I think much like a Bitcoin halving, we're going to see sort of that 6 months later, a year later, when that supply shock actually starts to kick in. We're going to see a 90% reduction in issuance of new Ethereum with no selling pressure from miners. I mean, rationally, if you even understand the most basic economic concept of supply and demand, if supply is going to go down dramatically and demand even just stays the same or decreases slightly, the number should go up, right? I mean, it's basically mathematically certain. Just that's why we have 4-year cycles in Bitcoin, which, by the way, we're right at the bottom of what would be a normal 4-year cycle here, would be October, November, December, based on historical precedent. Another reason to believe we're bottoming. So I think Ethereum becomes a massively bullish asset with time, but I don't expect the day the merge happens or over those hours for that to necessarily be the case. And, a lot of people obviously are triggered by Ethereum bullishness because they're over emotional jackass maxi children. I love them to death, to be honest, because I think they've pushed the space this far, but like, come on, man. Right. I think everybody should be cheering for a successful merge because it's good for the space. And I think that if you're a Bitcoin maxi and you're threatened by this, you should actually be pretty happy because it puts a further differentiation between Bitcoin and everything else, right? And I've always viewed the market as Bitcoin, store of value, digital gold, all those narratives, and everything else, which are sort of speculative VC tech investments, which includes Ethereum. That means Ethereum probably has a lot more upside, right? But I think this further sort of distances proof of work and Bitcoin from everything else in that differentiation. And so I think that maxis should celebrate this change. They don't have to worry about the threat of Ethereum and proof of work anymore, and they can go back to their mom's basements.
What do you think of all the lately? I've at least seen a lot of maxis come out, or the cyber hornets. I don't know. I think there's 3 categories for, because I'm a Bitcoiner, but I believe in all the tech within our space. But then you have the maxi, and then you have the toxic cyber hornet that won't stop and will literally rip you apart for saying anything but Bitcoin. What do you make of it now that there are more maxis coming out and saying, hey guys, we need to really think about what we're saying and our narrative? I mean, I guess Dan Held. Sorry about that. He came out and he was like, guys, I seen the tweet where he was like, hey, we need to start, looking at things a little bit differently here. What do you make of that now?
Yeah, Nick Carter got absolutely ripped, and he's a Bitcoin maxi. And one of the core developers of Bitcoin came out and said that maximalism was basically the biggest threat to Bitcoin. And you're talking about a guy who is
Matt,
one of the core developers. Yeah. And so, listen, as you said, there are people who proudly identify as toxic maximalists. Like, read it right in their profile, and they come out and try to dunk on anyone who says anything bad. But the reality is, you can live in the world that you've created as ideal in your mind, or you can live in the actual world where human beings are existing, right? So you can either go live in your fantasy or you can adjust. And so my opinion is that I don't think there's more of them. I think that they're just triggered and threatened right now. And so they're coming back out. I really do think that, because it's the same voices that have been there for years. It's not really new people. Right. Maybe a few new ones that have been there and didn't have as big of a following are getting a bigger following because, they're in the maxi circle jerk and have been noticed, but listen, every community in this space is a circle jerk. That's not unique to maxis, but I don't think that there's more of them. In fact, I would say that if Dan Held and those guys are any sort of indication, I would say that maximalism is losing its grip as people start to adjust to the new reality. I've always sort of said, that the thing I don't get about being toxic and maximalist is when you are threatened by literally everything. I think it weakens the case, or it weakens your image for the thing that you're passionate about, right? To me, Bitcoin is so important, powerful, unique that none of this stuff is even a threat. So why acknowledge it, right? It's like being one of the biggest, like being Elon Musk, but if he got triggered by every single person that commented on his tweets negatively and took the time to respond, right? Because Elon Musk, he doesn't need to do that shit, right?
No.
And so I feel like Bitcoin maximalism is sort of the same. They've carried us this far. Now I think it's time to sort of be more welcoming, accommodating, friendly. Is the thing is like, I don't understand the mentality, and this is not a sweeping generalization, just to some of them. It's like, what's the point of being aggressive, angry, pissed off, calling everyone a scammer and a criminal when it would obviously be much better to say, hey, listen, I disagree with your view. This is why I think Bitcoin is so much better. You would get so many more Bitcoiners, right? It's like, how do you talk about mainstream adoption as a toxic Bitcoin maximalist and say it's going to take over the world, but then also shit on literally any person who disagrees with your view, who would never want to be a Bitcoiner because they don't want to join your community because you've been so mean to them, right? So I think it's just time for people to sort of like become more friendly, accommodating. I mean, there's like 12 people on earth who are super passionate about crypto at this point, no matter what numbers we want to talk about, right? Obviously, it's hyperbolic, but like we talk about 200, 300, 400 million people, like most of those people bought one NFT or Doge, and we're counting them as like, crypto advocates or whatever. It's just not the case. There's a couple million people who really care, right? That's not big enough to be infighting.
I just say, for me, you're not going to bring adoption in if you're screaming at people. Like, I don't know how you educate anybody on Bitcoin if you're just screaming at them. Half of these people don't get replies. If you go into Twitter spaces where, they're holding a Bitcoin maxi room, I mean, you learn nothing from it. You really, honestly, Scott, you learn nothing from it. I've been in these rooms and there's nothing that's being said that makes me say, oh my God, I want to rush into Bitcoin. Because my points are real simple. Dogecoin, if you take an example, Dogecoin helped bring more people into Bitcoin. And why do I say that? It's because you had people that didn't understand Bitcoin, weren't getting educated about it, or couldn't get a reply from these maxis, the so-called maxis who love Bitcoin, wouldn't reply to these people. They go in through Dogecoin during the whole, GameStop, AMC stuff with the Wall Street bets. They go in through Dogecoin. The Dogecoin community literally tells people, hey, like, yeah, Dogecoin's cool. And if you want a Bitcoin, you can buy it at a fraction. People start getting into Bitcoin through Dogecoin and their community because they actually went ahead and educated people without violence. Like, that's why, for me personally, I don't see like, when I talk about Bitcoin, I talk about like sound money. I talk about it being a store of value, but I never compare it with anything else in this space. Like, are you in the same, like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Mindset?
Like, it's Bitcoin and everything else. We can talk about Bitcoin without having to mention any other things. I mean, we have a language problem in our space, right? I mean, a cryptocurrency is such a misnomer because 99% of them are not trying to be currencies. Maybe Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency and everything else isn't. So I don't see that they should be bundled together in any way. I mean, listen, POW, proof of work, that shit means prisoner of war, right? POS, my entire life, means you're a piece of shit. It doesn't mean proof of stake, right? So
or
we have terrible names, right? We have, yeah, exactly.
It could be proof of shaft because of what, Vitalik's going out there with pictures.
Yeah, that's true. My God. And so, like, I think it's exactly what you're saying, that we should be educating and differentiating. But I think that we used to have this sort of, certainly for me, maybe 15, 16, 17, if you got in, you 100% came in through Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was your gateway drug. It was the weed you smoked, and then you started doing crack, right? Because if you smoke weed, you're going to be doing crack like 2 weeks later. That's science. Everybody knows that, right? So then you start like Ripple and TRX and all this shit that started popping off at that time. Now, as you described, it's become the opposite. And I don't think Bitcoiners have really realized that, maybe, right? Used to buy, in fact, like, if you wanted to trade altcoins in 2016 or 2017, there were no tether pairs. You literally had to buy Bitcoin, send it to like Bittrex or whatever. That was even pre-Binance, and figure out how to trade on a Bitcoin pair, which gave Bitcoin that sort of benchmark value for the entire market. So a lot of people are still stuck in that mentality. Now you're more likely to get into crypto by buying an NFT or a meme coin or whatever. Now we can talk about whether that's good or bad, but that's not the point. It's reality. Like I said, we need to remain grounded in reality. So Bitcoiners shouldn't scream at people buying NFTs. They should explain to people who are buying NFTs why Bitcoin is better or important, or why maybe NFTs are fine if it's 10% of your portfolio, but 70% of your portfolio should be Bitcoin, right? There's a million ways to skin that cat. But the fact is that as time goes on, Bitcoin, just by sheer virtue of the size of the market and how many new things are being created, how many use cases there are for blockchain, it naturally will not dominate at the same levels that it did in the past. So the mentality has to be, educating new people into the space on Bitcoin, not, and it used to be try to keep all these people who came in through Bitcoin from going down those other roads.
My biggest thing is because you brought up Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. When I see people go on national TV and say, well, Bitcoin is not a cryptocurrency, I get super confused. Like, seriously, I've been in this space for a long time. When you go out there and
It's
you try
the
to twist that
cryptocurrency.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, unless I read the white paper wrong, and unless I really read what Satoshi put out there on Bitcoin Talk or whatever other messages he put out there, I mean, the word crypto was always out there.
Yeah, it is cryptographic. I mean, it's a very, very basic thing. I think people are trying to make the differentiation because they want to say there's Bitcoin and then there's cryptos, right? And so they want those two different baskets. But to deny the fact that Bitcoin is the original cryptocurrency is just trying to rewrite history.
And I would go like say, okay, it is a cryptocurrency, but this is what it offers. And I think that's where, like, you know, my blood boils is we try to separate everything and we get people confused because there's a lot of people jumping into this space and they really want to learn about Bitcoin, but the misinformation or the narratives that are being put out there, they really suck. And yeah, I agree with you. Look, if we want free markets, because I love free markets, if we want free markets, then unfortunately these other things are going to come into play. But if there's enough education out there and if there's enough people like yourself out there educating people about what this space is about, people will not jump into these shit coins that they're so passionate about people not jumping into. But at the same token, you go into a room and they're like, I don't give a fuck when you come into Bitcoin. You can go in now or you can come in 5 years, but at the end of the day, you will be coming in. Like, that narrative, like, really is a fucked up one, and it sends people elsewhere. Speaking of elsewhere, NFTs. What are your thoughts about NFTs? Now, I get it with of course, while we're doing an interview, somebody has to call, but with NFTs, I see NFTs in 2 to 3 years doing more than just, you know, giving people the ability to put out 10,000 PFPs. I see them right now. You have Alfa Romeo as an example that have embedded NFT technology into their vehicles. What are your thoughts there, Scott, with NFTs?
Starbucks is coming into NFTs, right? And Web3 with a partnership with Polygon, right? Starbucks, correct. They make like 4 billion cups of coffee a year. Starbucks. Only. Right? So that should tell you all that you need to know about the potential of NFTs. What's interesting is, you know, I came into crypto in 2016. When I started hearing about NFTs in late 17 and late 2018, it wasn't really a narrative about, you know, silly cartoon artwork with an alliterative name, right? It was about transferring your mortgage or your car title or your medical records, or just transferring value in general from one person to another without a predatory third party in the middle, and doing that for a very specific thing, as opposed to just as a monetary system, for example, of you know, eliminating a third party from a transaction, a payment. So, correct. Like, listen, this is just the way that all of these sort of new nascent asset classes develop. First, you get the most basic bitch like use case possible, and stupid cartoons that are going to be worth nothing is obviously that, right? And exactly. I don't care what anyone says, like, those passionate NFT communities, I'm not even shitting on them, but it's about the number going up and not about the like deep belief in that community. Like, dude, you're buying a pudgy penguin because it's going to go up, not because you identify as a penguin, right? And people act like it's like, I'll keep my penguin forever, and then it goes to zero and their penguin, like, right.
Well, the guy did cry on Spaces that the penguin did change his life. That
he is his penguin and his penguin is him, and yeah, man,
you remember that,
listen,
right?
I don't begrudge anyone their penguin pronouns, but like, I think that we're just seeing the very tip of the iceberg for NFTs. I think that 99, and I've been saying this since it happened, but I think 99% of this goes to zero. It disappears. It's utterly forgettable, but that's good. That's what happens when you have a new technology and it's trying to find its footing, and those failed projects advance the ball. But I really think, like I said, the real utility for NFTs is going to be in all those other more boring but sticky sort of use cases than simply bad art, right? It's not even good art.
No, so, I agree with you. Like, half of the shit comes from Fiverr. So like, They're just like, do something and like, let me throw out 10,000 PFPs and it gets sold out. And then the project most likely rugs and people are just holding, a JPEG. I agree with you in terms of, real estate. Like I really do believe that NFTs will be, and especially, titling in general. I think that's where NFTs will go ahead and shine. And I think the tech is phenomenal there. And they'll have a real use
I
case.
I agree
I
100%.
think, and you'll also, I think with the art aspect, I think you'll give one of one creators an opportunity to be in an industry and show off um their creative sides, where like if you've ever been to Times Square, the guys that literally, there's some people out there that produce dope art, and now they have an industry where they can literally be like Beeble in a sense, not, sell. I don't think somebody will sell something again for 69
$69
million
million.
dollars,
Right.
but you can have somebody making a good living and not be out there on the streets on a rainy day, begging somebody to sit down in
Yeah.
the chair and sell them something on $10. Or the art galleries here in New York, which literally take 60 to 70% of, the sale, and then leave the artist with 30%, which makes no sense when the artist went ahead and put all this work into it. So I think that's, for me, from my side, I think that's where NFTs lie. And
it's almost like, yeah, taking the NFT model and utilizing it, but to continue what has given art value in the past, which is the scarcity and the quality and the talent, right? So having an NFT attached to a physical piece of art that's a one of one, or a one of one that's a genuine piece of art that someone spent hours, days, and months creating, and it's not 10,000 of them that are, generative or whatever. Yes, I think that's where the art use case should be, right? That's actually art.
Like Vesa, like I heard about, it was crypto art before NFT, right? So like I heard when Vesa was running around to every conference talking about, he did this thing where everybody would sign, the crypto art that he was creating. Like those are the type of artists that I talk about. The Bored Ape, by the way, like I have a Bored Ape, not because of the art, not because of the art, just because I can network. Because when you have all these people
that has the legitimate community, but that's like, and then 900 projects try to copy that, and everyone really just wants to be an ape.
Correct.
Right. All those people are just having like envy of the ape community, and so they're trying to create their own. And so, yeah, I think that I agree.
What do you think about? Okay, so Scott, we go from when the market's pumping, everything's going right. We're all about free market. We're fucking free market maxis. I want free market, free market. And then the markets go down. We want regulation, regulation, regulation. Where do you stand on this? Because for me personally, regulation only helps the 1%. And I'm talking about the BlackRock, Fidelity, Citadels, etc. What's your stance there?
That's a really hard question. I love that you said that, because I always talk about the cognitive dissonance that comes with sort of cheering on institutional adoption, right? You start as a Bitcoiner, it's like short the bankers, long Bitcoin, right? Pump sold sort of catchphrase. And they're like, oh shit, but BlackRock's here. They're going to make the number go up. And there's no evil empire like Star Wars style more than BlackRock on this planet, right? Those are the people that you want farthest away from the asset that you're trying to protect as humanly possible. But then again, if you believe that Bitcoin is going to become the global, asset, global standard, then, well, you need Wall Street and everybody else to come along. So it's sort of, it can go both ways. Cheering regulation for me makes sense if you're looking for clarity so that entrepreneurs can operate without the threat of getting in trouble or sued or put in jail for simply trying to make the world a better place. So I think you need regulatory clarity so that companies can even try to operate in the United States. I think that's important, but that has to be really loose, reasonable regulation that makes sense and allows those entrepreneurs to thrive. And that's not what we're seeing proposed, right? So I think it's the kind of, you can cheer regulation if it's the right kind, because it allows people to innovate. But cheering the kind of regulation that we're looking at, yes, that's just saying, well, at least Wall Street will be able to operate and pensions will be able to buy. But that does not help every man and or the original sort of ethos of Bitcoin. Like, yes, I would love for them to say, for example, Hester Peirce, she's one of the SEC commissioners, has proposed many times this amazing safe harbor idea, right? And so you have the Gary Gensler on one side who says there's Bitcoin and everything else is a security and we're going to regulate it as such.
Yeah.
And then there's Hester Pierce, she's a commissioner of the same agency, right? She's a regulator, and says, listen, what we should have is safe harbor. You come in, you say, I have 3 years to prove that I'm not a security, because let's be real. If you want true decentralization, it rarely starts there, right? Everyone sort of acts like you have centralized and decentralized, but it's gray, right? It's a sliding scale. To be successful, even DAOs, all these things, you need strong leadership and you need to be somewhat centralized when you start, and then you can sort of decentralize from there. So give them 3 years to prove that they've decentralized. At that point, you can be deemed not a security, but you have 3 years where you can do whatever you want to attempt to not be a security. That's just reasonable. That's what it should be, right? And she's an SEC commissioner, one of a few. I don't see why that's not being entertained more seriously. But so the bottom line is, I think regulation is fine if it's reasonable regulation. I think that's just not what we're going to get.
Like crypto friendly, like other countries are just, they have their hands open and they're like, come here, no problem.
Yeah.
Come
That's
innovate,
still
guys.
regulation though, right? So you can't make regulation a 4-letter word, because regulation can be good. Correct.
Like I'm okay. So like, I hate BlackRock and Citadel. Like I'd rather wait 10 years, Scott, for adoption to hit than have BlackRock come in here with Citadel and Fidelity to expedite it. Like I can care less about them because they don't.
These are the guys who are literally buying up every like slum in America and charging predatory rents to the poorest people in the world, and that's who you want controlling Bitcoin.
Exactly. Like that. Like, and I see like guys that have been in this space for a long time rooting for it, I'm like, it's the same thing happens in my mind. I'm like, hold on, weren't we about like bring down the banks, like F the banks, after institutions, like, and now we're like, come on in, look what's happening, look, they're adopting Bitcoin. It goes against everything.
If Elizabeth Warren bought 1 Bitcoin, everybody would love her.
Oh, forget about it. We'd have a parade for
like
the next
Ted Cruz. Everyone was like, I hate this guy, he's the worst. Oh, Ted Cruz owns 1 Bitcoin. Oh, he's one of us, right? And then it's all like whatever. I have no opinion on any of these politicians. I'm just saying the most hated people can simply buy 1 Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden the Bitcoin community rallies behind them. It's the same with institutions.
What do you think about this bill that's been presented to Congress by oh my God,
Gillibrand?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable, right? I don't think it'll get passed in the manner that we want, but I think it's pretty clear right now that stable coins need some sort of regulatory rails, right?
Sure.
I mean, thank you, Do Kwon, right?
Yeah.
Yet again, though, you want to talk about misnomers, like they should not have been able to call UST a stablecoin. Algorithmic stablecoin should just be like algorithmic speculative asset, correct, right? But certainly the fact that they could call that a stable coin is so damaging to stable coins that are actually stable coins. Yet another problem with our language, right? But I think that bill really sort of takes a reasonable approach. It says you can spend a certain amount of crypto without it being a taxable transaction. So now we can make it somewhat of a currency, or at least a means of exchange. You can go buy your coffee and not have to worry about that being a taxable sale of your Bitcoin that you need to track. Nobody in their right mind who's accurately paying their taxes in the United States right now wants to spend Bitcoin on anything. And that's not because it's not a good means of exchange. It's because if I literally buy a $5 cup of coffee, I have to calculate the cost basis and then report that $5 sale as a taxable gain. It's absurd, right? So things like that, I think, are very, very reasonable. It's just one of those things where, listen, yet again, we have to be grounded in reality. Regulation is coming, so we have to meet them somewhere in the middle and make it something that actually works for us, and not pretend we're gonna live in a world. Listen, it could be much better because we could live in a world with almost no regulation, right? That would be great.
Absolutely.
But if we're going to get it, I'm really psyched that there's a couple Congress people who are passionate about Bitcoin and care about this space that are pushing something forward. But that said, like I said, I think we're going to be talking about this same bill 2 or 3 years from now that's going to be chopped down, earmarked, with all kinds of fat and compromise, and we'll get tiny pieces of it and never see the entire thing. But I think it was a very reasonable first proposal for a negotiation.
You don't think that people aren't spending their, well, I think I'll speak for myself. I'm not spending Bitcoin because I guess I can say I'm privileged to live in the United States of America.
You don't have to.
Correct, right? It's because everybody's, if you're telling me Scott, you go on, you read, you do great TA, and you're out there, you're saying, okay, in the future, hypothetically, I'm not saying you said this, but hypothetically, it's going to hit 250. Why am I
I think
spending
so.
it?
Yeah.
But why would I
Yeah.
spend Bitcoin?
Right. No,
I have no reason to.
Right. I think, but I agree. I think first, I don't sell Bitcoin, right? I just don't. Like, I'm holding it. I've always viewed it as sort of not my retirement account, but my children's retirement account, right? Something I want to pass down for generations. That maybe I'm nuts, right? But that's how I view the asset. But there are a lot of people who want to see Bitcoin become a legitimate currency and transact in it because they think that that's how you get mainstream adoption. I agree with that. And that's a really sort of a tough thing even in my mind, because like you want to participate, but you also want to hold it because you think it's going to go up. But if you're one of those that passionately wants to transact, and listen, you said we're fortunate in the United States, but if you live in El Salvador, you might actually want to transact in Bitcoin, right? There's places all over the world where it's just superior to the local currency. And at that point, you want to be clear to do that without having to like jump through hoops to figure out what that means for your taxes or for the law and such, right? It needs to be really cleared. Basically, you and I want to be able to have the ability to hold it forever, but we also want other people to have the ability to spend it if they so choose.
Absolutely. And since you said El Salvador, and that's where I was going next. All right. Fortune magazine writes an article about El Salvador has been a failure. But what are your thoughts on that? I personally don't believe you can judge something after 12 months. I think give it about,
10 years,
maybe 3 years, 4 years before we start judging. But what are your thoughts on, number one, an article being written out like that, and what are your thoughts on El Salvador and Bitcoin in general?
Listen, it's my first gut instinct to the El Salvador news was, this is amazing. I hope they don't fuck it up, right? Because it's like when you're the first, the eyes of the world are on you, and if things go bad, it's good to slow adoption, not increase it, right? So I think that it's one of those things that could go either way. But to your point, you have to have a low time preference when you're talking about Bitcoin in general. You should be looking at 10 plus years for any decision you make. You should never be thinking about a year away. So it's complete nonsense for them to write an article a year later and say it's been a failure, because it hasn't hurt El Salvador at all. Just because their paper value of their portfolio is down, it's not like they're selling it at the bottom to pay for, municipal services or something. If they were being forced to sell it right now lower than they bought it and weren't viewing it as an investment long term on the balance sheet, then that would make perfect sense to call it a failure. But that's not what's happening right now. They're just holding and probably going to continue to buy more. So I cheer the level of adoption. I think people need to give it time, and I think that others will follow in suit. But sadly, probably only if we get a huge bull run and things go up and everybody gets excited again. But I think that there has been a real level of adoption on the ground in El Salvador. Certainly not going to claim that the entire population is passionate about it or uses it, but I think that it's been good for them. Even if you just view it literally, and I don't, but as a PR play, right? Think how many people have gone and spent their money in El Salvador, or interested or talking about a country that nobody in the world was talking about, just as a result of this, right? And so
I think it was a phenomenal PR play. I think it was phenomenal.
Yeah, so I think so too. Nobody's talking about El Salvador. The whole world
nobody knew what El Salvador.
Salvador
Nobody. I guarantee you, nobody knew El Salvador.
Yeah, they couldn't point it out on a map. Sure, still can't.
To me, it was like when they did it, from one angle, I was like, okay, they did a really good move, because PR wise, they'll get a lot of people interested. Some people might fly down there just to see what it's all about. And Bitcoiners were just going crazy, and it was great for adoption. And if it works out there, well, look at the other countries. A lot of Latin American countries, raised their hand and said, you know what, we want to do the same thing. Like you had Brazil and others that literally raised their hands and said, hey, how do we get this done in our countries? Who do you think is the next country to go ahead and actually pass Bitcoin as legal tender?
Hard to guess, because you would have said some of the countries you just mentioned, Brazil, perhaps in Argentina, where hyperinflation is the issue. Paraguay had some really sort of friendly legislation on the table. But what's happened is that I think those countries have seen how much pressure the United States, World Bank, IMF have put on El Salvador. And so they're shying away. And Argentina was ready effectively to make a move towards legal tender, or at least make it very friendly. And the IMF literally came in and said, your loans are off the table if you do this. And every country in South America, unfortunately, needs predatory loans that make them beholden to the IMF for the rest of time. That's the playbook, right? So El Salvador was unique because El Salvador is dollarized, right? So the currency of El Salvador was already the US dollar. So of course that's a threat, but they don't have a local currency that can be hyperinflated by other countries through sanctions or manipulation. So they didn't really have the same level of risk as a lot of these other countries were. Like currency war is a huge thing. And if one of these countries adopts Bitcoin and the United States or the IMF doesn't want them to, they'll literally just crush their currency until it hyperinflates and destroy them. Right. So I don't think that you can't do that. The United States doesn't want to crush El Salvador's economy, which is using the dollar. Right. So I think that El Salvador was in a uniquely strong position to attempt this. So those others, we may see forms of legislation, but you've seen it over the last year. They've all sort of proposed it. There's been one or two visionaries, and then it immediately gets sort of pulled back and removed, and we haven't heard about it. So I'm not that not that convinced that right now we're going to see more nation state adoption. And frankly, even if we do, I think it'll be a blip on the news radar. Like, Central African Republic did it. I'm not saying that's like a huge country that people are concerned about, but I don't think the price of Bitcoin moved 30 cents on that announcement.
yeah. I got to tell you, you bring some humor to it as well. Scott, what do you think about the digital dollar? So like my perception 10 years from now is, okay, if they come out with a digital dollar, which they will eventually, I would hope that some way, somehow, if we call Bitcoin a store of value, that somehow it ties into this digital dollar. You might think I'm insane, but that's my thought process and ultimate hope that it does. What are your thoughts on the digital dollar?
Well, I think that that's a nice hope, and anything's possible, and you're not far off historical precedent. I mean, that would be a gold standard if you viewed Bitcoin as the new gold, right? If central banks started actually buying Bitcoin because they believed it was a store of value because of the deflationary aspects, et cetera, like they have gold, then it would not be such a far-fetched idea to have a gold standard, Bitcoin standard with a new central bank digital currency. I don't think that will happen, but it's not crazy. The world was on a gold standard for more time than it wasn't, right? We've only really had fiat-dominated economy since the 1970s. So I don't think that's crazy, but I think there's a few ways this could go, right? I agree with you. I don't think it's coming anytime soon, but I do think it's inevitable. I mean, technology is inevitable. So obviously physical cash is going to go the way of the dodo bird. And I mean, we already transact digitally. Like, how often do you use cash versus credit card or PayPal or Venmo? I mean, people transact digitally, so we have a digital dollar, right? The dollar is primarily a spreadsheet, like a ledger, just like crypto or whatever. So that's neither here nor there. I think that either we get a central bank digital currency far down the road when it's far too late and crypto is already pervasive and sort of mainstream and people don't even care that much. Or I think that something like USDC, which is heavily regulated, sort of becomes the de facto central bank digital currency. And we get one of these highly regulated stable coins. And they're like, we don't really need to, the Fed doesn't go down the road of creating their own central bank digital currency. They just sort of control USDC, make sure that it's properly regulated and people use it that way, right? And adopt an already existing stable coin.
Question. What do you think about Richard Hart?
I think he's hilarious. Like, honestly, so I would say that my initial take was like I was sort of dismissive of Hex. I thought that it seemed like a Ponzi scheme just when I read through it, and obviously then you're also affected by the negative sort of feelings of others about it. But like, first of all, I've never like done the research on the guy, right? And so I don't know that much to give an educated opinion. But I would say that I enjoy his antics.
Me too. I don't know.
I think that he's done a very good job of becoming like sort of a caricature on purpose, right? Like purposely of like a crypto bro and just living it up and embracing it and sort of like throwing it back in the face of the haters by throwing his lifestyle and success in their face. And I haven't dug in deep, but I know that he's had at least some very accurate predictions as to what would happen with Bitcoin, and strong thoughts from the early days. And listen, I'm not a Hex investor. I'm not begrudging anyone who might be. I don't really get passionately involved in anything. Like you and I talked about already, free markets. People want to invest in Hex. Listen, even if it was, I'm not saying it was, but even if something is a Ponzi scheme, or I think it's stupid, or I think that some people might be in it and make money on that Ponzi scheme before it goes bust, or they might be passionate about it. People should be able to invest in whatever the hell they want. I think that he's purposely polarizing it. I think that's it. That he's doing it on purpose, and it's working exceptionally well. Yeah,
I had him on the broadcast. He was like, "I got to do this because you guys don't listen to me. Anything that I say." And I think he is an intelligent guy.
He's obviously smart. I mean, give me a break. There's no question the guy has to be smart.
But he's like, nobody listens to me. Nobody wants to interview me. Nobody wants to put me in the papers. You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to buy a bunch of useless shit, and I'm just going to put it out there. And you know what? I just asked you what your thoughts are on Richard.
And you never would have. You never would have if he wasn't like rocking Versace jumpsuits in his world's fastest Lambo with the biggest diamond, And why do I even know that he has all those things, right? Because he's like in my feed all day working. It's working. Like, listen, I don't think that Hex is, I don't think it's the next global reserve currency, right?
I don't either.
There's clearly a lot of people who have made a lot of money on it. I'm not going to go out and call something a Ponzi scheme if I haven't done the work. And I know a lot of people have called it that. I'm not sure that that's fair. Just not my thing. But
see, my thing is, that's the thing with me, Scott. Like, this entire industry that we're in, for the most part, people aren't just throwing around the word scam, but the loudest voices are. And I think, like, just to call something a scam without doing any research really sucks, because you haven't dived deep into it to call something a scam or somebody a scammer. I hate those two things that come out within our industry.
I do too,
we want to destroy. We want to eat it. Like, we're already getting enough people that hate us, like from the outside, like Congress and oh my God, Bitcoin's affecting the climate and all this shit. You have enough people attacking us. We attack each other. Why? Just for likes and retweets? Really?
Humans just can't help them. Humans just can't help themselves, man. But it's like the boy who cried wolf, right? If you call everything a scammer, then the real scammers are able to operate extremely easily in this atmosphere of widespread sort of. I mean, there are some very real predators and scammers and scams in the crypto space that need to be called out and identified, right? Also, just because something goes down does not make it a scam, by the way. Right. And so in hindsight, something's down 90%. And they go, look, that was a scam. And they're like, literally fucking everything is down 90%. Right.
Exactly.
Like, Netflix isn't a scam, and that went down 75, 80%. Right. And so like the hindsight sort of, I told you so, it's a scam. Price does not indicate that something is a scam. It actually, rug pulling or being a scam indicates that it's a scam. And so when you call everyone and everything a scammer or a scam, it means that the actual scammers and scams can just blend right in and not be called out appropriately.
That is actually a fucking phenomenal point. So I hope when people watch this, that you hear that exactly right there. Not that you weren't interesting as it is, Scott, but that right there hits. What are your thoughts on, because this is where we, obviously we talk about cryptocurrency all day long. You do, like, it's our job, right? We come on here and we analyze the entire market. What are your thoughts on Andrew Tate? And do you believe people should have their platforms taken away from them?
To be quite honest, I have no idea who the fucking guy is, except for the.
Are you serious?
So I know now the name because I looked it up when I started seeing all the controversy. But what's crazy, talking about scammers, he was on Instagram, right? Or was it TikTok? One of them. I don't use TikTok, and I don't have an Instagram account because actually, this is crazy. I had a big Instagram account that I've had for my DJ days, like forever. I didn't really use it for anything crypto related.
Yeah.
And people started to make, as you've seen, you have a million fake profiles around you, right? So people would make Scott Melker with like 2 L's or whatever, and contact everybody who was following me and be like, how's your trading going, bro? Like, I can make you turn your too big. Right. So I was reporting these people all day, every day, everyone in my life, like friends, family. Is this you? All day, 10 texts a day. Like, is this your Instagram account? So I was like stopped using Instagram in general to give them less like fuel for the fire. But then someone who was scamming using my name reported my actual account as the scam copycat account. And so now my actual Instagram account, which I have not been able to get back in 4 or 5 months, was reported and removed for being the imposter account. Right. So
Unreal.
that's the long way of me saying I have no idea what the hell's happening on any social media that's not Twitter. But yeah, I know that it was like some kind of date rapey something or other. Listen, I don't think that anyone should be deplatformed. I think that the free market has the power to remove somebody if they're bad enough, and that's what should happen. You know, the best way to deplatform an asshole is stop talking about them.
There you go. And I said the same
there's
thing.
nothing
like,
a person hates more than becoming irrelevant, right? Just stop talking.
Yeah.
Like if you don't like him, just I don't know, stop talking.
You
about
imagine
the guy.
like I thought if you don't deplatform Tate, then he goes away by 2023. Like literally, like you're not talking about him no more. But by deplatforming him, you're now going to allow more people to get interested. Well, why did they do that? Let me go ahead and search him up and let me figure out what he's about and what is he saying that is really keeping all these or allowing these networks to not allow him to go ahead and speak his mind. So I felt like they shouldn't have done that.
I still listen to Michael Jackson. I still listen to Michael Jackson, man.
I'm just surprised you don't have an Instagram account. So like I thought you were taking selfies and stuff.
Now, yeah, all day, with my meals. I like to take pictures of my breakfast every day because people are interested in that.
Before obviously I let you go because I know you're a busy guy, man. Meme tokens. Do we have another meme economy, or are we done with that?
Yes. No, we're not done with it, man. Come on. Like people can say whatever they want, talk about lessons learned and blah, blah, blah. Humans do the same dumb shit every cycle, and that's the way of it. Do you think that the market, like forget even meme economy and crypto, whatever, we're so small. Look at the global economy and see how many cycles of repeated mistakes they make, right? It was literally only 2008 that like this shit all just happened. Like it's taken all of 13 or 14 years for us to basically repeat the same bad behaviors and replicate them and crash the economy again, right? And then, I mean, you can then jump to crypto. We all rail against 2008, 2009, the big banks, all the problems. And then we created Celsius and Voyager and all these things. By the way, I'm one of Voyager's biggest creditors. So I'm not saying that I was smart enough to avoid it. I'm just saying we basically replicated all of the failed parts of previous financial systems, but with less regulation and less secure rails so that people could truly get fucked.
Yeah.
I think that, so if that's an example, memes, yes, people are going to always like to gamble on fun shit, right? And that's not going away anytime soon. So I think we will have massive meme cycles coming up, and it'll be the same as before. People will FOMO in, they'll go nuts. They'll think that shit that's that was sub penny is going to $10, and it'll stop at 70 cents when a random billionaire goes on Saturday Night Live. I'm not talking about any specific coins, but like you get, listen, I actually like Doge was before it got so out of control on this cycle, was everyone in crypto, if you were here 14, 15, 16, 17, it was the best asset in the world to trade. It had this cyclical pump where you just like buy it at 15 or 20 sats. Yes, I said sats because like I said before, you couldn't buy. There was no USDT, and it was such a fraction of a penny that you couldn't have. You bought it with Bitcoin. It went from 15 to 180 or 210. You sold it. It came all the way back down. And 3 months later, it did the thing again, over and over and over again. And we all knew it was a fun joke that we could make money on. And that was awesome. Right. And I think that we will have fun jokes you can make money on in the future. The problem is when people who don't understand it's a fun joke start to think that they're buying, the next Amazon stock. That's when people get hurt.
I think Dogecoin caught me off guard because just like you said, it would pump a little bit and it'd go back down. So it would be a great thing to trade. But when it went up, it caught me off guard. It did.
Yeah, dude, I think I sold it at like, I had a huge bag again. There was a point where I did the math, unfortunately, because my wife was there, where I was like, if I had held my Dogecoin from 2018 to the top of the thing, I was like, I would have had like $80 million in Dogecoin.
Phenomenal.
Right? Oh yeah, but like I don't begrudge myself the decision. I made money every single time, and I was trading it. You know what I mean? I never in a million years thought it was going to 70 cents. In a million years, I thought a penny was like as far as this fun thing could go, and so on that last cycle, I had made a bunch of money selling it at a penny.
I was like, when it hit 6 cents, I'm like, oh, that's it. This
Yeah, no
is it.
way. No
Yeah, it's just like,
way. Oh
and
yeah.
then you see it
10,
going, and
10x
then
later.
Elon, and then like that meme economy, AMC, GameStop,
It really,
and it
yeah.
was
I mean, it was lightning in a bottle. Yeah.
um. All right, to finish this off, where do you see? We're not gonna hold you to it, and you don't have to answer it, but where do you see Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Ethereum? Yeah, I'm gonna stick with that. Bitcoin and Ethereum. Where do you see them next cycle? What do they top?
I'm glad you said next cycle as opposed to like by the end of the year, because like there's nothing that makes you look dumber than a random prediction that people play over and over again that you didn't really mean. Right.
Correct.
I think that it's actually damaging for people to try to give like price predictions that are tied to times, because it's just not going to happen. It gives people hope. They think that it's a guarantee because they don't understand. And so I don't like making predictions. That said, like I thought the last cycle was going to hit 100 grand, right? I thought it
Me
was six
too.
figures. We were sitting at 69. It looked ready to just absolutely blast off. There were some people who obviously called that top. But I, I can't really fathom a world where Bitcoin doesn't get to a couple $100,000, right? Maybe after the next halving, a few years, 230, 250. Those were always sort of my predictions. I don't think that's the top, by the way. I think it becomes $1 million asset, but I think we're talking about decades down the road, right? And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to time that. But 200, 230, 250, and I think easily 10 grand for ETH, but probably way more. Honestly, I think ETH then, 20, 30,000, something like that. I thought ETH would go to 10 when it went to 5-ish. And I thought that Bitcoin was going to 100 when it went to 69. So take everything with a grain of
Exactly.
salt. But there will be
But it's
more
not a bad
cycles.
track
There
record.
will be
I
more
mean, calling
cycles, and
stuff,
they always go higher.
but like saying something when it was at 35 to say that it was going to 100. I mean, we did pretty
So
well when we called these kind of numbers.
Business Insider reached out to me very recently, and I love Business Insider. As you know, we were on the spaces together, but it was sort of a hit piece on influencers they were doing, and they did not include me in it because they understood my responses when he hit me up. It was like all this weird stuff about like my background, like, weren't you a realtor? I was like, I had my real estate license, but they wanted to like print like ex realtor with bad prediction. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's what they were going for. But so he was like, there was an article and he pointed out, he's like, you predicted Bitcoin would hit $100,000 in the last cycle. You were wrong. Do you think that this has affected your credibility and that people should listen to you anymore? Right. So anyways, so I click on the link. It's from an article. And what I said very clearly, and I pointed this out to him, was Bitcoin was in the 30s, by the way. And I said, and it had dropped from 65. And I said, I expect to see another all-time high this year. I would not be surprised if we saw $100,000. Well, it made a new all-time high and it didn't get to 100, and I'm not surprised by that either, right? And so that wasn't like some grand price prediction, but when you make those, they kind of hold you to it, and people just remember the number that you said and not really the way that you said it. But I think we will continue to make all-time highs because all markets go up and to the right if you zoom out and take enough time. So why wouldn't Bitcoin end up in the hundreds of thousands?
I just wanted to tell him, can you go ahead and ask the same questions to the people that predicted like Netflix and like Apple and like Microsoft were going to hit their all-time or these all-time highs? Like, yeah, I said the same thing. I think it was going to 100. There was nothing stopping it. Like, I didn't think nothing was going to stop it. But then like the economy, like I don't control the economy. I don't I'm not sitting there with the feds raising rates and shit. Like I'm not doing these things. Like it
Dave
wasn't
just
my
said he's a
fault.
Fed. Dave just said he's a Fed, guys.
No, I'm not. I'm not. Last one, and I said this was the last one, but this was really because you said something about Ethereum. Do you believe now the voices got louder, so this is why I'm going to ask it. People right now on social media are constantly saying the flippening is going to happen. Now,
I don't
for me
think
personally,
it matters.
Like, right?
Why does that matter? Like I said, if Bitcoin and Ethereum, you view them as completely different assets, even almost asset classes like I do, like I don't give a shit if Google has a bigger market cap than Amazon. Like they're both cool. Right? Like it's such an arbitrary metric and it makes no difference. And they both have different tokenomics and supply demand sort of nuance and issuance. And so maybe, but like if it does, would it last? Would it just be for 5 days? Would it matter? Like what happens the day that Ethereum flips Bitcoin for an hour? It's like
That's what
everyone
that's what I
like
said.
yeah, what like
At
who
most a few
cares?
days. At most a few days,
Yeah,
and
but
that's
like,
it.
why does it matter? Like what?
Well,
Like
but
I said, Bitcoin that doesn't. If Ethereum ends up with a bigger market cap, which is sort of an like arbitrary metric, anyways. But if it ends up with a bigger market cap than Bitcoin, the day that happens, does Bitcoin somehow become like irrelevant or less important or less compelling? No, it changes literally nothing.
I think it's because the Bitcoin maxis, the hardcore, I'm not the Bitcoiners, the maxis themselves, the toxic,
can't take it.
I think people want to see them suffer. And like that's so bad. Like just to talk about that kind of shit is bad, but like I think people just want to be spiteful and see it happen just to say, there you go. Now what? Now say something.
Yeah, I agree.
But on that point, I just want to say you're doing phenomenal things. I'm watching you from the sidelines. Congratulations on everything.
I'm watching
I've
as
seen,
well.
I don't know if you're just, I don't know if more stuff is coming out from your side because I just saw the first. I think you sat down with Dan and you guys were like talking and look really. The production is on point. A1.
We've definitely, we've definitely improved over the last 6 months. The production. I mean, a lot of that was COVID related. When I started the podcast itself, was 2 weeks before COVID lockdowns.
That's
so
crazy.
like we had all these grand plans, and then it ended up being obviously like Zoom only for years. So like when things started to open again, I started going to I went to Bitcoin Miami Consensus. I'm going to Mainnet, and then I don't go there to be a part of the conference. I go there because everybody else is there, and I can record like 25, 30 podcasts in a marathon and get the higher production quality, the better in-person conversations. And so that's where it sort of has improved massively because this is awesome. Like it's a great there's still something about like sitting face to face with someone, that is unique and I think is better. So yeah, we've upped the quality a lot since we've gotten, the in person. It's much more visually appealing.
Definitely 100. I tell you again.
And I was complimenting your studio and your background right before we got on. So
yes, and Scott made sure that my mic was on because it turned off for a second, and Scott was like, "Yo, your mic might not be on," and situation handled.
Bro, I was a DJ. Forget even that I podcast. Like I've been screaming and nobody can hear me into the dead mic more times in my life than I can count.
But I appreciate you coming on. Unfiltered is always like, this isn't really not like a podcast. It's just a conversation. And I just ask questions. And I like when you got into crypto, I don't really care, and I'm sure there are a ton of podcasts that you've appeared on that
we've all told that story 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Every one of us.
I don't want you to sit here like Snoop Dogg just reinventing like the whole entry. Like I got into Bitcoin. Like, Snoop Dogg does it really fun.
When I started the podcast, I had no idea what I was doing, and the first question was always someone's backstory. And then like 10 minutes later, I'd be like, "Holy shit, nobody wanted to hear that."
Exactly.
Nobody anywhere except for like that dude's mom, who's really proud.
If you can tell the people where they can find you, that'd be great. Because Scott is a really good follow. I follow him. You guys should follow him as well. What can they get more of
everything stems from Twitter. Yeah, I think everything stems from Twitter at Scott Melker, SCOTTMELKER. There you can find the podcast, YouTube, newsletter, all the other things that I'm doing, but it all, it's all tagged right there in my description. I'd love to reciprocate. We gotta run this back the other way for sure.
No doubt. I am ready when you have a slot available, and can't wait to see it. I'll be down in Bitcoin 2023. I'll be down there unless something happens with monkeypox and or some shit like that. But I'll be down there as long as everything's open, and I can't wait to meet you in person.
Just don't sleep with any monkeys. You're good. We'll be.
I'm good. I am staying away from all monkeys.
Don't do it. A bat had sex with a pangolin and fucked up the whole world. So.
And on that note, that was a show, Unfiltered, episode 11. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Find us on Apple, Spotify, and obviously on YouTube. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Scott, thank you.
Thanks, brother.